Hello everyone and welcome back to the 3T Path channel. Welcome back to our Uddhava-gita course. My name is Giridhari. And today we're starting a new chapter in our Uddhava-gita course where Krishna is going to describe first how to get out of matter. Step-by-step guide to go beyond, up in the gunas. When you go to sattva and then going beyond sattva with the focus on dharma. So we'll be seeing that in the beginning of this class now. And later on, not in this class, but later on, I don't think it's going to be in this class, we'll be hearing the story in this chapter of the Hamsa avatar, a very little known avatar, but very philosophical, very interesting avatar that showed up only in front of the four Kumaras and Lord Brahma, very specific coming of the Lord. But anyway, if you want to watch the whole course, and you can go to Uddhava-gita.com, or you can see the instructions here in the description of this video to become a member of this channel, and you can access the whole course. Okay, so let's get started. So we're in the 11th canto, chapter 13, verse 1. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said the three modes of material nature, the gunas, namely sattva, rajas, and tamas, translated as goodness, passion, and ignorance, pertain to material intelligence and not the spirit soul. By development of sattva, material goodness, one can conquer the modes of rajas, passion, and tamas, ignorance, and by cultivation of transcendental goodness, Shuddha Sattva, one may free oneself from material sattva. Okay, lots of terms here, so let's see if we can make this a little clearer. So, you have the three gunas. What are the three gunas? They are what material energy is. So everything you see here, everything about the material existence is composed of these three gunas. So everything. So think about them as, I don't know, some, subatomic components that build everything in existence in the material world. In the material world. Okay, so everything material, the gunas. Now you have these three gunas, tamas, rajas, and sattva. Now, Krishna says right off the bat, he says, look, the modes, they pertain to material intelligence. What is he saying? He's saying like these modes, they are not affecting actually your soul, Atman, the real you. No, because they're material and you're not material. So a material thing can't affect a non-material thing. It's like two different realities, just as you can't hear an AM radio station if you're on an FM radio, if you know anything about radios. I don't even know if this example is valid today. Do people even know there are radios with radio waves? I think so. But anyway, you can't pick it up. So this is like a different thing. It's just not in the same thing at all. So you can't pick it up. So a non-material thing, Atman, we're actually not dealing with matter, which is one of the interesting things about yoga, is explaining how we interact with matter is through our material intelligence, actually a material mind, more specifically mind intelligence and false ego. Okay, buddhi, now you have your atma, buddhi, and ahankar. So through that you interact with matter. So Krishna is saying, look, even sattva, the highest, most noble of material, the finest of material vibrations, it's only interacting with your material side, with your intelligence, with buddhi. So, we have to work with that because we want to get out of here, so that's not enough. Okay, then he says, first step, by developing sattva, you can conquer rajas and tamas. So this is a very important point. This is actually a crucial point, and Krishna taught this very carefully to Arjuna as well in Bhagavad-gita, right? He dedicates 2.5 chapters of the 18 chapters of Bhagavad-gita just to talk about the gunas. Why? Because you have to cultivate sattva. Why? Because then you can subdue the effects of rajas and tamas in your life. And why is that important? Because when you're under the effect of rajas, you lose track of reality. You get confused. In rajas, we lose track of ourselves. You disconnect from the here and now. Your mind goes to the future or the past in what I call the fantasy paradigm. You have lots of anxiety. You have lots of desires. You're lost from what's really important. You lose focus. Your mind goes towards material stuff and the future and desires and fear, and you just get stuck in the what I call the fantasy paradigm. So it's very bad for the soul, very bad. So you're suffering while it's happening, and you're accumulating all this karma at the same time, which is going to give you more trouble. So it's very bad. So that's why Krishna says, look, first thing you have to do is cultivate sattva so you can subdue rajas, because rajas is bad. And you think rajas is bad, just wait until you hear about tamas. So if you let tamas act, then it's a total disaster. In tamas, you're just accumulating heaps of papa, like negative karma, just heaps of it. So tamas is very bad. You're completely suffering, you're in depression, you're crazy, you don't know what's going on. So great suffering, depression, you're really down, and you're acting crazy, like violent and crazy is what tamas is. So horrible karma being accumulated. So Krishna says we want to do that. We want to cultivate sattva, and of course it's, if you read my book, 3T Path, there's all these suggestions, there's all these lifestyle changes you need, diet, and how you take care of yourself, and not using drugs and all these things, but we're not going to get into that here. But you have to cultivate sattva. Now, when you do that, okay, so now I'm in sattva, but that's still material stuff. I'm still in the material world. So I don't want to, being in sattva isn't the goal. No, our goal as yogis is to go beyond the gunas. We want to transcend the gunas. So Krishna says, look, first you get in sattva. Then we want to go beyond sattva. So how are we going to do that? Then we're going to try to cultivate transcendence, like a consciousness, a spiritual consciousness, to go beyond just material sattva. So it's very important. It's like first, yeah, you need sattva, but then we want to go beyond sattva as well. Okay, purport. Sattva in the material world never exists in a pure form. Therefore, it is common knowledge that on the material platform, no one is working without personal motivation, rajas. In the material world, goodness is always mixed with some amount of rajas and tamas. Whereas spiritual or purified goodness, called Vishuddha Sattva, represents the liberated platform of perfection. Materially, one is proud to be an honest, compassionate man. But unless one is fully Krishna conscious, one will speak truths that are not ultimately significant. And one will give mercy that is ultimately useless. Why is that? How can mercy be useless? Well, the idea is, if you help on the material platform, if all of this material stuff is all just the theater, it's all just Maya, then it's kind of, think of a dream. Let's say you had a dream last night, and in this dream, you helped a drowning person. So that was very nice, it was very compassionate, right? You were dreaming, a person was drowning, and you saved them. But it was useless, right? Because it was just a dream. Actually, nobody was drowning. You didn't do anything. It was all an illusion. There's no benefit from it because it's all poof, it's all gone. And this material reality is like that. So if you don't connect things to God, if you don't make it transcendental, make it an offering, yajna, to God, to Krishna, then all you're doing is useless. It's just, plus or minus points on your karma scorecard. It's useless because it's all an illusion. So that's a little hard to understand, but you can try to understand that. Because the onward march of material time removes all situations and persons from the material stage, our so-called mercy and truth apply to situations that shortly do not exist. Real truth is eternal, and real mercy means to situate people in eternal truth. Still, for an ordinary person, cultivation of material goodness may be a preliminary stage on the road to Krishna consciousness. For example, it is stated in the 10th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam that one who is addicted to meat eating cannot understand the pastimes of Lord Krishna. By cultivation of the material mode of goodness, however, one may become a vegetarian and perhaps come to appreciate the sublime process of Krishna consciousness. Since it is clearly stated in Bhagavad-gita that the material modes of nature constantly rotate, one must take advantage of an elevated position in material goodness to step onto the transcendental platform. Otherwise, the wheel of time turns. One will again go into the darkness of material tamas, material ignorance. So you have to grab your chance. So you cultivate your sattva. You try, if you're here, you're probably already like pretty sattvic, or else you couldn't stand this channel. Yes, a person in rajas and tamas, they can't even stand something like this stuff, this content of this channel. It's repulsive to them. It's repulsive. That's why there aren't too many subscribers here. Because this is a repulsive content for your average person dominated by rajas and tamas. Their minds just they can't deal with this knowledge and truth and sitting down and meditation and oh my God, this is horrible. They just want to see a 30-second short of somebody doing something funny, or something sexy, or a little dance, or a little something quirky. That's what they want to see, because that's rajas and tamas. So if you're here, you're probably in tamas. So in rajas, you're probably in sattva. So what you want to do in sattva then is to grab onto transcendence before your life goes crazy again, before your mind gets contaminated by just overwhelmed by rajas and tamas, and then you're like the one watching those crazy little shorts or something. So this is the chance when you're little, okay, I've got some clarity now. You can't just enjoy that clarity. You can't just sit there in the material mode of goodness in sattva and material sattva and just yeah, this is nice, because it's nice. Sattva is nice. It's I'm peaceful. You can't just sit there. You have to grab onto transcendence. You have to take this moment to get truly spiritual. Because this is your chance, because there's no chance of going spiritual when you're dominated by rajas and tamas. So this is your chance to go beyond. Otherwise, things will happen, things will flow, life never stops, influences will come, and before you know it, the wheel of samsara has turned, and God knows where you'll be and what state of mind you'll be in. No idea. It's a wheel of samsara. You're on top, you're on the bottom, you're human, you're a dog, you're a demigod, you're a bacteria. It just keeps going. So you have to take it now while you can. Okay, very good. So, if I can verse 2. When the living entity becomes strongly situated in sattva, then dharma, characterized by devotional service to me, my bhakti, Krishna says bhakti to me, becomes prominent. So, this is a very important comment. We'll get back to it. One can strengthen sattva by cultivation of those things that are already situated in sattva, and thus dharma arises. So this is the strategy laid out by Krishna here, laid out by Krishna in Bhagavad-gita. This is the only path forward. So pay attention if you want to have a good human life. You have to cultivate sattva. How do you cultivate sattva? You do that by, getting in touch with things which are sattvic. So that's why we have a sattvic diet. That's why we maintain cleanliness, because it's sattvic. That's why we maintain things organized, because that's sattva. That's why we don't do drugs or alcohol, because drugs and alcohol are tamas, the very opposite of sattva. That's why we try to keep in touch and consume content that is sattvic, like you're doing now. We try to not consume too much, content that's rajas and tamas, because that's going to affect us. We try not to hang out and be intimate with people who are in rajas and tamas. We want to be in contact with sangha. Remember, Krishna did a whole thing on the importance of satsanga, on the importance of this association. He said, you want to be in touch with people who at least are in sattva, preferably, devotees, preferably already like bhaktas, but if not, at least people who are sattvic. That means people who are, good people. They're correct, they're moral, ethical people, well-behaved, also who, vegetarian and clean and yoga and meditation and, people who are compassionate and merciful. You want to be around these people. So all these different things, all these lifestyle issues, association, the kind of cultural content you imbibe every day, you want to do that sattvic. You want the sattvic stuff. And of course, preferably the transcendental stuff, association with the bhaktas, absorbing spiritual content like you're doing now. That's even better. But at least sattvic. You want to do that. So you do that, so you focus on sattva. Now why are we doing the sattva thing? Very important connection. So really try to get this right. Very important connection. When you get sattva, you get dharma. You get the dharma focus. Very important. Very important. And a proof that you are in sattva is that you are in dharma. They go together. So Krishna says that one of the ways you can tell that someone is in sattva guna is that they're doing their dharma. And if you're doing your dharma, you're in sattva guna. So to stay in sattva guna, you want to do your dharma. And by staying in dharma, you develop more sattva guna. It's just like they go together. You can't have one without the other. You can't be in sattva guna and not doing your dharma. And if you don't do your dharma, you're not going to be in sattva guna. It's just they go together. Okay? So it's a very important point. And that's why people get confused with the modes. Because people will say like, oh, look at Arjuna. He's in a battlefield. He's a general in the battlefield. He must be in rajas. No, of course not. He was focused on dharma. He was completely, he was actually in Vishuddha sattva. He was in transcendental mode. He was doing his service he was doing it as an offering to Krishna. He was in yoga. But never mind that. But even just without his consciousness being dedicated to Krishna, he was in sattva because he was doing his dharma for the sake of doing his dharma, not for any other motivation. That's how you know you're in sattva. When you're dharmic, when you have dharma consciousness, when you do things because you have to do things, because it's your duty, because it's your purpose, not because it's fun, not because you're going to get some profit from it, not because, or you're like not going to do it because it's not interesting, because it's dangerous. No, you don't care if it's difficult, if it's dangerous. You don't care if it's going to give you a loss or gain. No, none of these things matter. Is it my dharma? Is it my purpose? Then I'm going to do it. That's it. There's no other consideration. I'm doing it because it's my dharma. That is sattva. That is the state of sattva. That's the practice of tapas. When you're so fixed that you can just, oh, but I don't feel like it. Doesn't matter. I didn't ask if you felt like it or not. Oh, but it's going to be hard. It doesn't matter. Nobody's asked like, oh, do the easy thing. There's no such instruction from Krishna. Oh, yes, always choose the easy thing. No, it's not about, it doesn't matter if it's hard. It was very hard for Arjuna to fight battle of Kurukshetra. Very hard. On many levels. Very hard. It doesn't matter. It was his duty. It's his dharma. You have to do it. Period. Nothing else matters. Okay, nothing else matters. So you have to do it. Okay, so that's dharma and that is sattva. So this is a very important point in this verse. Try to really connect this and it'll be really good for your life. So become strongly situated in sattva, then you become strongly situated in dharma. And by cultivating sattvic things, you become situated in sattva and therefore you become situated in dharma. Very nice. Okay, purport. Since the three modes of material nature are constantly in conflict, vying for supremacy, how is it possible that the mode of goodness can subdue the modes of passion and ignorance? Lord Krishna here explains how one can be strongly fixed in sattva, in the mode of goodness, which automatically gives rise to dharma. In the 14th chapter of Bhagavad-gita, in Bhagavad-gita, 14th chapter is all about the gunas. This is where Krishna presents first the topic of the gunas. Lord Krishna elaborately explains the things that are in goodness, passion and ignorance, sattva, rajas, and tamas. Thus, by choosing food, attitudes, work, recreation, etc., strictly in sattva, one will become situated in that mode. The usefulness of sattva guna, or the mode of goodness, is that it produces dharma. It produces dharma aimed at and characterized by devotional service to Lord Krishna. So the ultimate end of dharma, the highest dharma, and of course is bhakti, Krishna bhakti. That's like when dharma reaches its culmination. Without such bhakti to the Lord, the mode of goodness, sattva, is considered useless and merely another aspect of material illusion. So of course, from a yogic, spiritual platform, everything in matter is useless, right? The very last sutra of the Yoga Sutras, of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, Patanjali says that this world, the yogi understands that this world has zero value. Shunya artha, zero value. So the world has zero value for the soul. We don't need to be here at all. This is just a nuisance. Okay, fine. So from that platform, the material mode of goodness, sattva guna, is useless. But, since we're actually here in the material world, it's always good. Because at least in sattva guna, you're having a good life experience. Like the experience of life is nice. It's happiness and peace. So it's a good life. It's a life well lived. Even if the person is an atheist. But it's a good life here. And a person in sattva is accumulating good karma. So they have good situations coming which will continue to make their lives pleasant and giving facility for them to hop onto the spiritual train and get all transcendental. It makes it life of, when you're suffering, and it's like the more you suffer, it's hard to have time and focus to become fully spiritual. It's hard. So it's always a good thing. So it's always possible. Here it says oh, it's useless. Yeah, it's useless, of course. It's useless. But it's also not useless. The word vridhat, or strengthened, increased, indicates clearly that one should come to the platform of vishuddha sattva, or transcendental goodness, purified goodness. The word vridhat indicates growth, and growth should not be stopped until full maturity is reached. The full maturity of goodness is called Vishuddha Sattva, or the transcendental platform on which there is no trace of any other quality. In pure goodness, all knowledge automatically manifests, and one can easily understand one's eternal loving relationship with Lord Krishna. This is the actual meaning and purpose of dharma, or of dharma. Srila Madhvacharya points out in this regard that an increase in sattva strengthens dharma, and the invigorated execution of dharma strengthens sattva. So this is key point, which I hope you now understand. In this way, one can advance higher and higher in the mode of spiritual happiness. Good stuff. Okay. Verse 3 of chapter 13. Dharma, strengthened by sattva, destroys the influence of rajas and tamas. So Krishna is repeating himself, because this is really important. So like I've repeated myself here, I'm sorry, but this, and then even Krishna's like, no, I'm just going to say it again here, because you really have to get this information right. So sattva destroys the influence of rajas and tamas. When rajas and tamas are overcome, their original cause, adharma, is quickly vanquished. Oh, so now here's the other side of the equation. It makes perfect sense. You have dharma, you get sattva, right? We've talked about this, right? Sattva gives you dharma, dharma gives you sattva. Now, what happens is that by doing all this sattva stuff, you are now subduing and eliminating rajas and tamas. They're lumped together because they're both terrible. So it's like, rajas is less terrible than tamas, but they're pretty bad. So they're kind of lumped together. It's like, you don't want to be here. Even though it's 3, it's like 2 against 1. So rajas and tamas, boo, we don't want them. So you subdue rajas and tamas. Okay, then Krishna says, when you do that, what happens? You overcome their original cause. What was the original cause? It was adharma. Right? I mean, if you have sattva and dharma on this side of the equation, then obviously you're going to have rajas and tamas and adharma. There's a little a in front, which means like anti-dharma. Like when you see this a in front, in Sanskrit, it means like not dharma. So it's the not dharma, so the anti-dharma, the opposite of dharma, adharma. So when you get rid of adharma, isn't that great? So in adharma, again, you don't want adharma. Dharma is just like when you're making a mess of things. Adharma is you screwing things up, being an idiot, making a mess of things, making other people's lives worse. That's adharma. It's making your life worse, other people's lives worse. It's destroying things, the planet. It's just making a mess. And of course, in the process, accumulating all this horrible papa, all this heavy negative karma. Okay, so that's it. We'll stop here. Very important lesson. I hope you can really grab onto this. Really important principle in the yoga path. So have the rest of your day with lots of peace and lots of love. Hare Krishna.